we see where there is a victory by Israel. Israel coming together, and they are able to shake Sisera off of them and his army. And of course, this is the death of Sisera is one of those things that he did not realize he was in a trap, and until it's too late, and that he is killed by a woman who is more clever than himself. And if you don't know how he died, you can go into Judges chapter 4 and see that for yourself. Now, that's not our lesson for this evening. That's not our lesson. We want to look at just a couple of verses from the Song of Deborah. We want to go to verse 1, so chapter 5, Judges chapter 5, verse 1, Then Deborah and Barak, the son of Abinoam, sang on that day, saying, When leaders lead in Israel, when the people willingly offer themselves, bless the Lord. All right, we want to look at this, because this is where you have leaders that are actually leading, and you have then that of the people willingly offering themselves. Bless the Lord. Things work well when this happens. But let's go to verse 9. Because one could think from verse 2 of that, the leaders are leading, and it is the common people, everybody else has to offer themselves. You've got to have 100% from the people, and the leaders, they just kind of point out and give commands. Actually, verse 9, My heart is with the rulers of Israel, my heart is with the rulers of Israel, who offer themselves willingly with the people. Bless the Lord. Notice, this is 100% participation. This is 100% sacrifice. Everyone is involved in this. Everybody. It's not that you have some kind of ruling class that says, go do it and get it done. Don't expect anything out of me other than I'm going to just sit here and critique you. All right? Don't expect anything else out of me. You just go get it done. The rulers offer themselves, and here's this combination. All are involved, and there is no selfishness. There's no self-centeredness. Everyone is involved. Everyone. And that would work in the days of Judges, and it works today, of where everybody is involved. The people offer themselves, and the leaders offer themselves. There is a flawed attitude. And I have seen it too many times. First is that of people. That would be that of, we could call it the people of Israel, or members of the church, who they have this idea of, you leaders serve us while we do nothing. All right, you serve us, we'll sit back, we'll do the critique. We'll sit back and we'll tell you if we like what you're doing or not. We'll sit back and you just do everything that needs to be done, plus whatever we say needs to be done. And this is the sort of thing that happened from time to time in the life of Moses. Exodus chapter 17:3, and it's not the only time this happened. Exodus chapter 17:3, someone would be coming up to Moses and ask, why have you brought us out of Egypt? Why have you taken us into this wilderness to kill us and our children and our livestock? Why have you done that? You know, we're all in this together. I should put it more correctly. They were all in it together. Moses didn't want to be there to begin with. Now he does. Now he's committed to it. He's absolutely committed to it. When God asks him, when God tells him what he's going to do, Moses didn't want to do it. He didn't want to be the deliverer of Israel. Somebody else can do that. Someone with greater skill can do that. But it's Moses that God had in fact trained up through all those years, 80 years, before he is called. 40 years being educated and understanding Egypt like only someone who was raised in Egypt could do. And then 40 years of being a shepherd in the wilderness. And now the last 40 years of his life is taking Israel out of Egypt, and he's going to be a shepherd of more difficult sheep is what he's doing. And with some of them from time to time. And this would also involve his brother and his sister. Miriam and Aaron could be one of those who suddenly are becoming a problem. And everything would appear to be on just Moses' shoulders, nobody else's. Just him or just the leaders. Nobody else is responsible. Well, everyone else is supposed to be working together. Going through the same hardships, yes. When they were thirsty, you think Moses wasn't thirsty? Of course he was. When it was a hard go, you think it wasn't hard for Moses as well? Well, of course it was. Now, we go to a place like Hebrews chapter 5. Let's turn there quickly. Hebrews chapter 5. And we see the writer of Hebrews addressing his readers, the primary readers, and we're secondary because it's coming to us many years later. In verse 12, Hebrews chapter 5, verse 12, for though by this time you ought to be teachers. Now that's a responsibility that those hearers or those readers should have already accomplished. They should already be to that point of being teachers. By this time you ought to be teachers. You need someone to teach you again the first principles of the oracles of God, and you have come to need milk and not solid food. All right? You're not growing. You're not growing as you should. And then we just go down to verse 14, but solid food belongs to those who are of full age. That is those who by reason of use have their senses exercised to discern both good and evil. What had they been doing? Languishing. What had they been doing? Really nothing. They hadn't been doing anything. They're just taking their ease, as it were. They're doing nothing. You taught us, okay, that's great. Now what do we do? Well, you take it and you go. It's your turn at bat. It's your turn. You get up and you do something. You get up and you teach others. Is it that everyone must be teaching you, or a select few must be teaching you, and there is nothing required out of you? How does that happen? Because I can look at numerous parables by Christ, and there's not a single category there of where Christ says all this work must be done in the vineyard except these people. Okay. All this work must be done in the household except this people. You serve them and they don't have to serve anything. They're just going to be the bulk of his kingdom and do nothing. There's not a single parable teaching that. Not the first one. Everyone is involved. You have the parable of the talents. All those servants were required to use what they had. You have the parable of the vine dressers. Every single one of them was put to work. All of them doing what they could do. Now, let's flip this over. Let's look at the other side. And I've seen this as well. Both sides are not, both extremes are not welcome with God. Not in the least. And that is leaders who see themselves as like executives, giving executive orders. You do the job, I'll sit back and tell you what to do. Okay? I'll sit back and once again, we'll watch and we will critique. We will do that. Now, before I get into this a little bit further, and we will be going to Nehemiah, let's just go ahead and go to Nehemiah. Go to Nehemiah chapter 3. I want to go back to the other one. I want to go back to, because it just occurred to me, that of the people saying, basically, we are here to fill a space. We are here to serve, we are here to be served, never to serve. Years ago, and I do mean years ago, I went on a tryout. I went to a congregation, and their preacher had left. And so it was a couple who divulged what had been going on and why that preacher had left. And the reason was that everything was required on him. If it was going to get done, he was the one that had to do it. If it was changing light bulbs, if it was mowing the lawn, if it was doing the banking, if it was even digging a well, which had to be done, he's the one that did it. Nobody else. And there was a select group that had elected themselves as official critics of if they didn't like something that he did, they would let him know. And eventually he got tired of that. And I told, after I heard that, I told the brethren, you don't want me doing all these things. There are certain things I'm good at, and there are certain things I'm not good at. But all of us are supposed to be involved. Every single one of us is to be involved. We are to do something to help. And you have those of your basic member who thinks, okay, here are the things you're supposed to be doing, and I've got a few more things for you to do now. Well, couldn't you be doing that? That's a great idea. Couldn't you do that? It was your idea. Couldn't you pick that up and run with it? Couldn't you do that? Why are you lumping more work on those who are already working? Why are you doing that? And why are you imagining other things that ought to be done? And I'll agree that ought to be done, but you could be doing that. Don't set it on top of others who are actually doing work. Now, let's go to leaders. Leaders, as we had said, just being executive decision makers. That's all they are. As I heard one man say, we've got a lot of bishops, we have no shepherds. Okay? We've got bishops who they just sit back and they just speak as it were ex cathedra, which they weren't. I'm just exaggerating that. That's what the Pope does. Who just speak and it should be done. Nehemiah chapter 3 and in verse 5. They are rebuilding the wall, and Nehemiah, he's not even in Jerusalem. He's way over in Persia when this book starts. He's serving the king over there. Similar to what Daniel was doing, serving the Persian kings and the Babylonian kings. But this is a cupbearer. Nehemiah is a cupbearer. And he finds out the condition of Jerusalem, and he is allowed to go. Now, he has to travel quite a distance from Susa, I can assume is where he was, but Persia, now all the way to Jerusalem. He's got to make that journey. While there are those in Jerusalem who didn't have to travel anywhere. They didn't have to travel anywhere. This is where they live. Why had they not done it yet? Why hadn't they done it? They weren't. Did they not have leaders? Yes, they did. Did they not have those who would follow? Yes, they did. But the city continues to be broken. Nothing is working. Nothing is happening. And Nehemiah comes and he starts rebuilding a people. He's got to do that first. And then they're going to rebuild the wall. But we see this, Nehemiah chapter 3, verse 5, next to them. This is talking about all those who are putting their hands to the work. But here's someone who's not. Next to them, the Tekoites made repairs. Okay, that's a certain family group. But their nobles did not put their shoulder to the work of their Lord. Now, their Lord is not Nehemiah. Their Lord is Jehovah God. They did not put their work to their shoulder to the work of their Lord. They didn't do it. Everybody else can do it. They're not going to do it. Why not? Why not do that? In Ezekiel chapter 34, going from verse 1 to 10, I'm not going to read that, but Ezekiel 34, but God is condemning the shepherds of that day. And these are spiritual leaders. These are spiritual leaders of the day. Calling them shepherds, and the things that they are doing. All they are doing is helping themselves to the benefits of their position. And he says they're fleecing the sheep. They are killing and eating the sheep. They don't care about the sheep whatsoever except how they can be benefited from it. They don't care anything about that. It's the sheep who must make the sacrifices. They themselves they don't make the first one. They don't make the first sacrifice. Everybody else does. And this is very similar. This is, matter of fact, it's identical to cults and cult leaders. A cult leader isn't going to move his finger to do one thing, or she move her finger for one thing. It's always the followers who should make and are required to make the absolute sacrifice. Not the leader. Leader doesn't do it. The leader just tells everyone else what they are to do. Now, what Deborah is saying is you have the people, they offer themselves, and the leaders, they offer themselves with the people. This is precisely how it's supposed to happen. But what happens if nobody is doing anything? We go to Revelation chapter 3. What happens if you have an entire congregation of where neither the leaders, they're not offering themselves, and the people, they're not offering themselves, and you have a dead church? Sardis. This is Revelation chapter 3, verse 1, and to the angel of the church in Sardis. These things says he who has the 7 spirits of God and the 7 stars. I know your works, that you have a name, that you are alive, but you are dead. You have a name that you're alive. Now, how did they have a name that they're alive? Because Sardis doesn't really have, as far as I could tell, has no meaning of life in that name. My only thought is that as far as other congregations were concerned, they would have seen Sardis as being a lively group, a group that was spiritually alive. But Christ's saying they're not. That they are dead, and there is very little left in there that has any life to it. They are dead. Now, he's addressing an entire congregation. These are believers of Christ. These are part of His kingdom, and He's not going to claim them for much longer. They're going to have to repent of those things. They're going to have to change those things. Here is where, if they're dead, it would appear that nobody appears to be doing anything. Now, going back to Revelation chapter 2, with Ephesus, they had left their first love, and we find that it was the works that they had done in the past. They're to do those works again. So Ephesus would be very similar to Sardis in that respect, that basically nothing was going on. They were doing nothing. Now, let's go to 2 Corinthians chapter 8. 2 Corinthians chapter 8. In the life of Paul, which is a class we just finished, we discussed these things. 2 Corinthians chapter 8, we begin in verse 1. Moreover, brethren, we make known to you the grace of God bestowed on the churches of Macedonia. All right, now, this is a letter to Corinth. Corinth is not in Macedonia. Corinth is in Achaia. Macedonia is to the north. It's a region to the north. Philippi is in Macedonia. Corinth is not. So he's talking about congregations to the north of there. All right, the churches in Macedonia. That in a great trial of affliction, the abundance of their joy and their deep poverty abounded in the riches of their liberality. Here, those people, those churches, or a single congregation, whatever it was, it does not matter. The point is still being made that here you have those who were offering themselves. They put their themselves where their faith is. They put their lives where their faith is. And whatever was necessary, and they could do it, they would do it. That is giving yourself. That is giving yourself. Did Christ do that for us? Who is the one that washed the apostles' feet? Who did it? It was Christ Himself who did that. Christ didn't sit back and demand they do it. Now, He demanded that they follow His example, nor did they pick someone else who's a disciple, not an apostle. Okay, you wash everybody's feet. Christ does it as an example, that if He can humble Himself and do that, so can we, and we better be. Humble ourselves. And I have known men who they want to be noted for having done great things. Washing feet doesn't get you the limelight. Washing feet does not get you in the headlines. And washing feet is a category. That's a category of lowly tasks, humble tasks. Things that need to be done, ought to be done. And there is this element of, I'm doing this out of love, not out of selfish ambitions, because that's not going to help you one bit with selfish ambitions. It's not going to help you one bit in looking heroic. It's not going to help you one bit in looking, in getting the praise and the limelight. It's not going to give you that at all. And men who want to do great things, great. Do those great things. But there are also some humble things that need to be done as well. There's some humble things that need to be done. That there are some lowly things that should be done, and willingly give ourselves to that. Verse 3, for I bear witness that according to their ability, yes, and beyond their ability, they were freely willing. They did this. They gave of themselves, imploring us with much urgency that we would receive the gift and the fellowship of the ministering of the saints. And not only as we had hoped, but they first gave themselves to the Lord and then to us by the will of God. They gave themselves willingly. Now, he's not saying that about Corinth. He's hoping for them to do the same thing. He's not saying that about Corinth. But if we go to chapter 12, I want us to look at something. Because Paul did give of himself. Paul's an apostle. Paul has a list of things that he has gone through there in 2 Corinthians chapter 11. He's gone through a list of things that he has gone through, and also that of an extraordinary event of being caught up into the third heaven and hearing things that it's unlawful for man to utter. Things beyond this earth that he saw and he heard. And then he talks about a thorn in the flesh that afflicted him, something that Christ was not going to take away, and tells him so. My grace is sufficient for you. Now, we come to verse 15, and we see Paul's work and his love. And I will notice what he says. And I will very gladly spend and be spent for your souls. I'll spend and I'll be spent. It means that he will bear the cost, whatever sacrifice needs to be made, he'll do it. He'll do it. And if it means, and that he's willing to be spent, means in his dying breath, he is trying to help them. Falling down dead, teaching them. He would be willing to do that. There is no selfishness involved here. There's no self-centeredness involved here. that He is willing to do whatever it takes, everything that's right, to help them. That this isn't Him coming to take advantage of them, of which He shows no one can make that claim. No one can ever make that claim that He ever went to Corinth to take advantage of them, because He did not do that. He didn't. Matter of fact, look at this. Though, continuing in verse 15, though the more abundantly I love you, the less I am loved. Willing to spend and be spent to a people who they love Him less and less, at least with some in there. With some. I'm not sure that it can be stated for all of them. But He says, the more I love you, the less I am loved. What's that all about? He is willing to give Himself. Are they willing to give themselves? He's willing to offer Himself. Are they willing to offer themselves? And it's everyone working together. Everyone. And no one gets a free ride. No one gets a point of where they are just going to be in a dark corner of the church, having done nothing, and be welcomed home by Christ, having done nothing. If you're given the time, you're giving the resources, you're given the energy, you're given all these things, what do you think Christ expects out of you? Now, someone, just going to say this because it needs to be specified. Someone who is converted at the very end of their life, there's not a whole lot they can do. They don't have a lot of time. They don't have a lot of energy. They don't have a lot of, may not have any resources whatsoever. Someone who at the last moments of their life, they can be forgiven, yes, and be brought into heaven. Now, that's someone being hired at the very end of the day. That's someone being hired when the day is closing. But for the rest of us, with whatever time we have, with whatever energy we have, let's put that for the purpose in which it has been given. And we are to work together. As Paul states, imitate me as I also imitate Christ. Or follow me as I also follow Christ. However you want to render that. That's 1 Corinthians 11:1. He is telling them that imitate Him. Was He imitating Christ? Yes. Was Christ willing to spend and be spent? And I would tell you, He did every bit of that. And more beyond what Paul ever did. Paul is just imitating Christ. And congregations, all members, are to imitate Christ. Don't think that the responsibility of everything lies with anyone else. Take responsibilities. Do what you can do. And let's do it now. Do what you can do. Because God is, with the parable, we're not going to read it, but with the parable of the talents, you have the man that has the 5, man with the 2, the man with the 1 talent. Man with the 1 talent just buried the talent and waited for the return of the master. And just in my mind, obviously this is a parable, but I envision that man with the 1 talent who hid his talent, did nothing, is just putting himself to sleep every night, comforting himself with the false notion that the master will be okay with this. He'll be okay that I hid that talent. He'll be okay that when he returns, just to have that talent back. He's going to be okay with that. Well, he's not. And that man is called wicked and lazy. And understand, those two go together. Someone who is lazy is also being wicked. So it's up to us. It's up to us as to what we're going to do. It's up to us. And God is glorified by our works and our giving of ourselves. Romans 12:1, we are to make ourselves a living sacrifice. Are we doing that? This evening, judgment is on its way. This day has come and soon will be over. So too will the day of judgment. It will arrive and it will be over. And when it's over, only one of two things is going to occur: being cast away into hell or being welcomed home in heaven. You get to decide. Christ has made it to where it doesn't have to be the first. It doesn't have to be hell. He has made it that way and given us every opportunity. We ask this evening, if you need to respond to the invitation, that you come as we stand and sing.